There's a special kind of emptiness that comes after losing a child. A silence so heavy, it drowns out everything else. Warren Keene knew that silence well as he drove alone to the old family cabin. 3 weeks after burying his 22-year-old daughter Lily. The place looked smaller now, forgotten among the pines, its wooden walls weathered by time. He hadn't been here in years. Lily had loved this cabin once, spent summers here drawing and dreaming. Now Warren was here simply because he couldn't bear to be anywhere else. As he walked through the dusty rooms, he began finding small things she'd left behind, sketches, letters, little pieces of her. Then he found something hidden in an old cabinet that would change his life forever. What could a grieving father discover that would give him reason to hope again? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The truck's engine ticked as it cooled in the driveway, the only sound besides Warren's boots crunching through 2 inches of fresh snow. He stood there a moment, one hand still on the door handle, looking at the cabin like it might disappear if he blinked. The structure seemed to sag under the weight of winter, its cedar shingles dark with moisture. The front porch steps he'd always meant to replace still tilted at that familiar angle. 3 weeks. It had been 3 weeks since the highway patrol officer knocked on his door at 6 in the morning. 3 weeks since the world stopped making sense. Warren pulled his duffel bag from the truck bed and walked toward the cabin, each step deliberate. The key stuck in the lock the way it always had, requiring that slight upward lift before it would turn. Some things never changed. He wished he could say the same about everything else. The door swung open with a groan, releasing a breath of stale air that smelled like pine and dust and time itself. Warren stepped inside and set his bag down, looking around at the main room. Afternoon light filtered through windows that hadn't been cleaned in years, casting everything in a sepia tone that made it feel like stepping into an old photograph. The cabin was exactly as he remembered, and nothing like it at all. The wood-burning stove squatted in the corner, the same mismatched furniture arranged around it, a couch with faded floral upholstery, 2 armchairs that didn't match each other or anything else, a coffee table scarred with cup rings and the carved initials of various family members spanning decades. His own initials were there somewhere, cut into the wood when he was 12. Lily's were there too. He'd helped her carve them when she was 7, her small hand gripping the pocket knife under his careful guidance, tongue sticking out in concentration the way it always did when she focused hard on something. Warren moved through the cabin slowly, trailing his fingers along the walls. The kitchen was a narrow galley with open shelves, the kind where you could see everything you owned and everything you'd neglected. Dust coated the plates, the mugs, the old percolator that had belonged to his parents. His wife Sarah had loved that percolator, insisted it made better coffee than any modern machine. Sarah, gone 10 years now, taken by cancer that moved through her body like a wildfire, leaving nothing but ash and absence. Warren had learned about grief then, thought he'd mastered it, adapted to it. He'd had to. There was a 7-year-old daughter who needed him to be strong, to be both parents, to somehow fill a space that could never really be filled. He'd done his best. God knew he'd tried. Warren opened the refrigerator out of habit, though he knew it would be empty and unplugged. The rubber seal had dried and cracked. Everything here was falling apart slowly, the way things do when no one's paying attention. The bedroom door creaked when he pushed it open. This had been Lily's room during their summer visits, before Sarah got sick, before everything changed. The walls were still that pale yellow Sarah had insisted on, saying it would catch the morning light. A twin bed with a bare mattress sat against one wall, a small dresser against another. The closet door stood half open, revealing shadows and forgotten things. Warren sat on the edge of the bed, springs squeaking under his weight. The mattress smelled musty, but underneath that was something else, something he couldn't quite name but recognized anyway. The scent of his daughter, somehow still here after all these years. Or maybe he was imagining it. Maybe grief did that, made you smell ghosts. He pulled out his phone, looked at the last photo in his gallery. Lily at her college graduation 3 months ago. Cap and gown, that brilliant smile, her whole life ahead of her. She'd worked so hard for that degree in graphic design, stayed up late perfecting projects, pushed through setbacks and self-doubt. Warren had been so proud, watching her walk across that stage, so certain that the hardest part was over, that now she could just live. 3 months. That's all she'd gotten. The accident happened on a Tuesday. She'd been driving home from a friend's apartment, probably tired, definitely not expecting the drunk driver who ran the red light at 50 miles an hour. The police said she wouldn't have felt anything. They always said that. Warren didn't know if it was true or just something they told grieving parents to help them sleep at night. He hadn't slept properly since. Warren stood and moved to the window, looking out at the forest that pressed close on all sides. Ponderosa pines, Douglas firs, the occasional aspen that would be bare now, waiting for spring. Lily had loved it here. She'd spent entire days exploring these woods, coming back with pockets full of interesting rocks and stories about birds she'd seen, deer that had watched her from a distance. "We should come here more often," she'd said once, maybe when she was 10 or 11. "This place feels like it remembers things." Warren hadn't understood what she meant then. He thought he might be starting to understand now. On the windowsill, something caught his eye. A small notebook, the kind with a spiral binding and a cardboard cover. He picked it up, recognizing it immediately. Lily's sketchbook from years ago, the edges worn soft, some pages dog-eared. He'd seen her carry this thing everywhere one summer, always drawing, always observing. His hands trembled as he opened it. The first page showed a sketch of the cabin itself, rendered in careful pencil strokes. She would have been maybe 9 when she drew this, her technique still developing, but the attention to detail already there. The next page showed a bird perched on a branch, then a close-up of pine needles, then the view from this very window. Warren flipped through slowly, each page a window into his daughter's young mind. Here was their truck, here was a squirrel, here was her own hand holding a flower. At the bottom of that page, in crayon, Lily Keene, age 8, artist. She'd known even then. The drawings progressed as he flipped through the sketchbook, her skill improving page by page, her eye for composition sharpening. And then toward the back, the drawings stopped. The remaining pages were blank, waiting for sketches that would never come. Warren closed the sketchbook and held it against his chest. This was why he'd come here, not to escape the grief. You couldn't escape that. It followed you everywhere like your own shadow, but to be somewhere that still held pieces of her. Somewhere he could touch things she'd touched, see things she'd seen. The house they'd shared in town was too full of her absence. Every room screamed with it. Her bedroom with clothes still hanging in the closet, her laptop on the desk, her books on the shelves. He couldn't walk past her door without that absence punching him in the chest. But here at the cabin, she'd never lived permanently. This was a place of visits and vacations, of temporary joy. Maybe that made it easier. Maybe here he could remember her without the constant reminder that she'd never come home again. Warren set the sketchbook back on the windowsill and turned to face the rest of the cabin. There was work to do. The stove needed cleaning, firewood needed chopping, the place needed airing out. Good. He needed tasks. Needed to keep his hands busy. Idle hands led to idle thoughts, and idle thoughts led to the kind of darkness that was hard to climb out of. He'd stay here as long as it took. Days, weeks, months. He had nowhere else to be. His leave from the civil engineering firm was indefinite. His boss had been understanding, told him to take all the time he needed. What else could he say? As Warren began unpacking his duffel bag, he noticed something else on the windowsill, partially hidden behind the sketchbook. A small rock, smooth and round, the kind you'd find in a stream bed. On its surface, in faded marker, Summer 2015. Lily had been 13 that summer. The last summer they'd spent any real time here together. Warren picked up the rock and turned it over in his palm. She'd been here since then, he knew. She'd mentioned coming up alone a couple of years ago, said she needed some quiet to think. He hadn't pressed her on it, had just been glad she felt independent enough to want time alone, mature enough to seek out solitude when she needed it. Now he wished he'd asked more questions. Wished he'd understood what she was thinking about, what had driven her to drive 2 hours into the mountains to be alone. The cabin felt warmer now, even without the stove lit. Or maybe that was just him, blood finally starting to move through his veins again after weeks of feeling frozen. Warren put the rock in his pocket and continued unpacking. He'd make a fire, heat some water, make this place livable again. And tomorrow, maybe, he'd start really looking around. Start seeing what else she might have left behind in this place that remembered things. Morning came slowly to the cabin, grey light creeping through the windows, like something reluctant. Warren had slept poorly on the couch, the fire in the stove burning down to coals sometime before dawn. He woke stiff and cold, his breath visible in the air, his back complaining about the uneven cushions. This was his third morning here. The first 2 had passed in a fog of basic survival, chopping wood, getting the stove working properly, making the place warm enough to inhabit. He'd eaten canned soup and stale crackers, hadn't bothered to shave, had spoken to no one except himself and the silence that pressed in from all sides. Now, pulling on a thick sweater and running a hand through his hair, Warren felt something shift. Not better exactly, just different, less numb. The grief was still there, would always be there, but underneath it was something else. A restlessness, a need to understand. He made coffee in the old percolator, the smell filling the cabin and reminding him sharply of Sarah. She'd have known what to do with this pain. She'd always known how to carry heavy things, how to find light in dark places. That's what cancer had taken from him 10 years ago, not just his wife, but his guide through the unbearable. Cup in hand, Warren began moving through the cabin with more purpose than he'd had in days. He opened drawers, looked in cabinets, poked through the small storage closet off the main room. Dust cobwebs, forgotten camping equipment, a box of old board games, a stack of yellowed paperbacks. And then, pushed far back on the top shelf behind a rolled-up sleeping bag, he found it. A cardboard box. Unremarkable, except for the fact that it was cleaner than everything around it. Recently placed, maybe, or at least moved. Warren pulled it down carefully, his heart already starting to beat faster. He knew somehow that this mattered, that this was why he'd come here. He carried the box to the table and sat down, coffee forgotten. The box wasn't taped shut, just folded closed. Inside, wrapped in a piece of soft cloth, was a bundle of papers tied together with kitchen twine. Letters, handwritten on various types of paper, notebook pages, stationery, even the back of a grocery receipt. All in Lily's handwriting, that familiar half-print, half-cursive that she'd developed in high school and never changed. Warren's hands shook as he untied the twine. The letters weren't in envelopes, weren't addressed to anyone. The top one was dated simply age 14. He unfolded it and began to read. "Dear future me," it started. "Mom died 6 months ago, and I don't know how to talk about it. Dad tries so hard to be okay for me that I can't tell him I'm not okay either. We're both pretending, I think. Both trying to protect each other. But I'm writing this down because someone told me it helps. Someone told me that writing to yourself is like having a conversation with the only person who really understands." Warren stopped reading, pressing his palm against his chest where something had started to crack open. She'd been 14. He'd thought they were managing, thought they were getting through it together. Had she really been that alone in her grief? He forced himself to continue reading. Lily wrote about missing her mother, about feeling guilty for forgetting what her voice sounded like sometimes. She wrote about school and friends and normal teenage concerns. But underneath everything was this current of sadness, of trying to be strong, of being scared about who she'd become without her mother to guide her. The letter ended. "I don't know if I'll ever read this again." Maybe that's not the point. Maybe the point is just to say it out loud, even if only on paper. Maybe that's enough. Warren set down the first letter and picked up the second, dated age 16. This one was longer, more introspective. Lily wrote about anxiety she'd been feeling, worry about disappointing her father, pressure to figure out her future when she barely understood her present. She wrote about a boy she liked who didn't know she existed, about a teacher who said her art showed real promise. about feeling like she was supposed to know what she wanted to be, when she still had no idea who she was. "Dad worked so hard," she wrote. "He gave up so much when Mom died, changed his whole life to take care of me. I see how tired he is sometimes, how he smiles even when I know he's sad. I can't add to that. I can't be another problem he has to solve. So I keep things to myself, handle them on my own. That's what growing up means, I think. Learning to carry your own weight." Warren had to stop reading. He stood up, walked to the window, pressed his forehead against the cold glass. She'd been carrying so much, and he'd never known. He'd thought he was protecting her by being strong, by not showing his own pain. But all he'd done was teach her to hide hers. After a few minutes, he returned to the table and picked up the third letter, dated age 19, college. She wrote about loving her design classes, about professors who challenged her, about friends she'd made. But she also wrote about feeling lost, about everyone around her seeming so certain of their paths while she still felt like she was wandering. She wrote about therapy she'd started, about learning coping strategies for anxiety, about slowly understanding that maybe it was okay not to have everything figured out. "I think about Mom a lot," she wrote. "Wonder what advice she'd give me. Dad tries and I love him for it, but there are things I need that he can't provide. Not because he doesn't want to, but because he's not her. Nobody is. I've been coming to the cabin alone sometimes, just to think, just to remember. It helps. There's something about this place that makes me feel closer to who I'm supposed to be." Warren hadn't known she was seeing a therapist, hadn't known she came to the cabin alone to think, hadn't known any of this. He reached for the fourth letter, the last one. Age 21. The handwriting was more mature now, steadier. Lily wrote about graduating soon, about job prospects, about a relationship that hadn't worked out but taught her things about herself. She wrote about feeling stronger, more grounded, but still uncertain about so much. "I've been thinking about legacy," she wrote. "What we leave behind, what matters. Mom left me her kindness, her creativity, her way of seeing beauty in small things. Dad has given me strength, resilience, the ability to keep going even when things are hard. But what will I leave? What mark will I make? I'm 21 years old and I have no idea, but I think that's okay. I think maybe the point isn't to know. The point is just to live intentionally, to pay attention, to love the people around you while you have them." The letter ended with a line that made Warren's breath catch. "I need to come back to the cabin soon. This place helps me remember what matters. Maybe I'll leave some things here, some pieces of myself. Just in case of what? Had she known something? Had she sensed somehow that her time was limited? Warren read through all 4 letters again, more slowly this time, trying to understand the daughter he'd thought he knew. Each letter revealed layers he'd never suspected, depth he'd never seen. She'd been protecting him, he realized. All these years, she'd been protecting him from her pain, the same way he'd tried to protect her from his. They'd both been so alone in their grief, so careful with each other, and neither had realized it. He sat at the table as the morning stretched into afternoon, letters spread before him like pieces of a puzzle. The cabin was silent, except for the occasional pop from the stove, the creak of old wood settling. Finally, as shadows began to lengthen, Warren carefully retied the letters and held them against his chest. These were gifts, he realized. Painful ones, but gifts nonetheless. They were letting him know his daughter in a way he never had while she was alive. And if she'd left these here, deliberately placed them where he might find them, what else had she left? The question settled over him with the weight of possibility. This wasn't random. The box had been too carefully placed, too deliberately preserved. Lily had meant for him to find this, had maybe impossibly left him a trail. Warren stood and looked around the cabin with new eyes. What else was here? What other pieces of his daughter were waiting to be discovered? For the first time since her death, he felt something other than crushing grief. He felt purpose, a direction, a reason to keep looking, keep moving, keep breathing. He would search every inch of this cabin if he had to. He would find whatever Lily had left behind. It wouldn't bring her back. Nothing could do that. But maybe it would help him understand. Maybe it would help him know the daughter he'd lost in a way he never had the chance to while she lived. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft and steady. Inside, Warren began to search. The next few days blurred together in a rhythm of discovery and reflection. Warren read the letters again and again, memorizing phrases, trying to hear Lily's voice in the words. Each reading revealed something new, a turn of phrase that sounded exactly like her, an observation that made him smile despite everything, a moment of vulnerability that broke his heart all over again. But he couldn't just sit with the letters. They'd opened something in him, a need to understand more, to find whatever else Lily might have left behind. He began searching the cabin systematically, starting with the obvious places and working his way toward the hidden corners. The bathroom medicine cabinet yielded nothing but expired aspirin and rusty razor blades. The kitchen cupboards held only dust and a family of mice who'd made a nest in an old flour sack. The main closet contained forgotten winter coats and boots that no longer fit anyone. Warren moved on to Lily's old bedroom, the yellow walls seeming dimmer now in the grey winter light. He opened the dresser drawers one by one, finding nothing but shelf paper and the smell of cedar. The closet was nearly empty. A few wire hangers, a box of childhood toys she'd apparently saved. He pulled out the toy box and sat on the floor, going through it piece by piece. A stuffed rabbit with one ear chewed off. A set of plastic horses, a wooden puzzle with 2 pieces missing. Normal childhood debris, nothing remarkable. Warren put each item back carefully, treating them like artifacts from an archaeological dig, which in a way they were. The nightstand drawer stuck when he tried to open it, swollen from humidity. Warren had to work it back and forth several times before it finally gave way. Inside, a flashlight with dead batteries, a dried-up pen, a stack of old postcards bound with a rubber band that crumbled when he touched it. And beneath the postcards, a small digital voice recorder. Warren's heart jumped. He recognized it immediately. He'd bought it for Lily when she started college, thinking she might use it to record lectures. She'd thanked him, but he'd never seen her use it, had assumed it ended up in a drawer somewhere, forgotten. But here it was, in the cabin, in her old bedroom. His hands trembled as he turned it over. The power button was on the side. He pressed it, not expecting anything, certain the batteries would be dead after 2 years. The small screen lit up. Battery indicator showed half full, and there were files, multiple audio files, all dated from the same weekend 2 years ago. Warren sat on the edge of the bed, holding the recorder like it might dissolve if he breathed too hard. This was Lily's voice, her actual voice, recorded when she was here alone, thinking thoughts she chose to preserve. He pressed play on the first file. Static, then a click, then, okay, testing. Is this thing on? Yeah, okay, it's recording. Lily's voice so clear and immediate, it felt like she was in the room with him. Warren closed his eyes, let the sound wash over him. So I don't really know why I'm doing this, the recording continued. Maybe because I've been writing letters to myself and that helps, so maybe talking to myself will help too. I don't know. I needed to get away for a few days, needed space to think. And this cabin has always been good for that. It's quiet here. Not the bad kind of quiet, the good kind. The kind where you can hear yourself think. A pause. The sound of movement, maybe Lily shifting position. I'm 20 years old and I feel like I should have more figured out than I do. Everyone at school seems so certain about everything. This is my major. This is my career path. This is where I'll be in 5 years. And I don't know. I love design, I do. But is it what I want to do forever? Is any decision I make now going to define my whole life? That feels like too much pressure. Another pause, longer this time. I've been having anxiety attacks. Started about 6 months ago. Nothing major, just sometimes my chest gets tight and I can't breathe right and my thoughts spiral. I started seeing a therapist. Haven't told Dad. I don't want him to worry. He's been through enough. Warren stopped the recording, pressed it against his forehead. She'd been having panic attacks and he'd had no idea. He'd seen her every day that year when she was home for breaks, talked to her on the phone weekly when she was at school, and he'd missed it completely. He felt like the worst father in the world. After a few minutes, he pressed play again. The therapist is helping, I think. She says anxiety is normal, especially for people who've experienced loss. She says I never really processed Mom's death, just pushed it down and kept going. Maybe that's true. Dad needed me to be okay, so I was okay. Or I pretended to be. Same thing, right? A bitter little laugh. I miss her still, always. People say it gets easier, but I don't think that's true. It gets different, maybe. The pain changes shape, but it doesn't go away. I dream about her sometimes, and when I wake up I have to remember all over again that she's gone. That's the worst part, the remembering. The recording ended. Warren sat in silence, tears running down his face. He'd thought he was protecting her by being strong. He'd thought if he could just hold it together, just be stable and present, that would be enough. But she'd needed to see his grief. She'd needed permission to show her own, and he'd never given her that. Warren pressed play on the second file. Day 2 at the cabin, Lily said. Went for a walk this morning. The woods are so quiet this time of year. Saw a deer, a doe, just standing there watching me. We looked at each other for maybe 30 seconds before she bounded away. It felt like, I don't know, like a moment of connection with something beyond myself. Does that sound stupid? Probably. She laughed, and Warren smiled despite his tears. That was so Lily, always second-guessing herself, always wondering if her thoughts were valid. I've been thinking about relationships, the recording continued. There was this guy, Alec. We dated for a few months last semester. He was nice, smart, everything you're supposed to want. But I ended it. He wanted to know why, and I couldn't explain it. I wasn't ready. I'm not ready. How can I be with someone when I don't even know who I am yet? Warren had never heard about Alec. Another thing she'd kept from him, another piece of her life she'd kept private. He tried not to feel hurt by it. She was 20 years old. She was supposed to have private things, supposed to have parts of her life that were hers alone. I think I need to be alone for a while, Lily said. Not lonely, just alone. Figure out who I am separate from what everyone expects me to be. Dad wants me to be happy and successful. My friends want me to be fun and available. Alec wanted me to be his girlfriend. But what do I want? That's what I need to figure out. The recording went quiet for a moment, then, this cabin feels like Mom somehow. Like she's still here in the walls, in the smell of the place, in the way the light comes through the windows. Is that crazy? I feel closer to her here than anywhere else. Maybe that's why I came. To remember what she was like, to ask her what I should do. Even though she can't answer. The file ended. Warren immediately started the third one. Okay, final recording, Lily said. I'm leaving tomorrow morning. These 3 days have been good, clarifying. I feel more centered than I have in months. I think I'm going to make this a regular thing, coming here alone when I need to think. This place is good for me. Good for my soul, if that doesn't sound too dramatic. A rustling sound, like pages turning. I've been sketching too. Forgot how much I love that. Just drawing what I see without any assignment or deadline or grade attached to it. Just art for art's sake. Maybe that's the answer. Do things because they matter to you, not because they matter to anyone else. Another pause. I should probably tell Dad about the therapy, about the anxiety. He'd want to know. He'd want to help. But I don't know. I've spent so long being the strong one, being the kid who's doing okay despite everything. It's hard to show weakness after that. It feels like letting him down somehow. Warren wiped his eyes, shook his head. She could never let him down. Never. If only he'd made that more clear. Anyway, Lily continued, I'm going to leave this recorder here. And the letters I wrote. Maybe someday I'll come back and listen to these, read those, see how much I've changed. Or maybe I'll never come back. Either way, this place will hold these pieces of me. That feels right somehow. Like this cabin is a time capsule of who I am right now, at 20, confused and anxious, and still figuring it all out. The recording ended with a soft click. Warren sat in the dim bedroom, holding the recorder, feeling like he'd just spent time with his daughter. Real time, not memory time. She'd been so alive in those recordings, so present, so undeniably herself. And she'd left them here deliberately, left them for safekeeping, or maybe, the thought struck him suddenly, left them for him to find. Had she known somehow? Had some part of her understood that he might need these someday? The cabin was getting dark. Warren stood, joints stiff from sitting so long, and made his way back to the main room. He fed the stove, made something that passed for dinner, but his mind was elsewhere. 2 years ago, Lily had come here alone, worked through her anxiety, recorded her thoughts. And now, 2 years later, he was here alone, finding what she'd left behind, learning who she really was. The coincidence felt too perfect to be random. It felt like design, like intention, like love. Warren fell into a routine over the following days. Mornings were for practical matters, keeping the fire going, melting snow for water when the pipes froze, making simple meals from the supplies he'd brought. Afternoons were for searching, for discovering, for slowly peeling back the layers of his daughter's hidden life. Evenings were for reflection, for sitting with what he'd found, for writing in a notebook he'd started keeping. The notebook had been Lily's idea in a way. Her letters, her recordings, they'd shown him the value of getting thoughts out of your head and into the world, even if the only witness was paper or empty air. So he wrote about what he was finding, what he was feeling, what he wished he'd done differently. It helped. Not enough, but some. On the 6th day at the cabin, Warren tackled the kitchen more thoroughly. He'd already gone through the obvious places, drawers, cabinets, the space under the sink. But now he pulled everything out, looking behind and beneath, checking for anything that might have been tucked away and forgotten. He was reaching into the back of the cabinet where they kept pots and pans when his fingers brushed against something that didn't belong. Not metal, not the wood of the cabinet back, paper. Warren pulled out a small spiral-bound book, its cover decorated with hand-drawn flowers and vines. He recognized Lily's artistic style immediately, the careful detail, the whimsical touches. He opened it to the first page. Lily's kitchen memories was written across the top in her neat handwriting. Below that, recipes from Grandma Sarah, copied with love and a whole lot of trial and error. Warren's throat tightened. Sarah, his wife, Lily's mother. The woman who'd taught their daughter to cook, who'd passed down family recipes with stories attached to each one. He'd forgotten about that, about the hours they'd spent together in the kitchen, Sarah patient and encouraging, while Lily measured and stirred and occasionally made a mess of things. He turned the page and found the first recipe, chicken soup. But it wasn't just ingredients and instructions. Lily had added notes in the margins. Grandma said the key is to start with a whole chicken, not just parts. Something about the bones and the flavor. I tried it both ways and she was right, as usual. Dad made this for me whenever I was sick. His never tasted quite like Grandma's, but it was still the best medicine. The fact that he tried, that he remembered, that he cared enough to spend 3 hours making soup, that was the real healing. Warren had to set the book down. He remembered those times, Lily curled up on the couch with a fever or a stomach bug, him in the kitchen trying to recreate Sarah's soup from memory. He'd never known if he got it right. Lily had always eaten it, always thanked him, but he'd assumed it was just daughterly politeness. Knowing now that it mattered, that she remembered, that she'd written about it years later, it cracked something open in his chest. He picked up the book again and continued reading. The next recipe was for blueberry pie. Made this with Grandma twice before she got too sick to stand for long periods. The second time, she told me the secret wasn't just cold butter and cold water, it was making it with someone you love. Baking isn't chemistry, she said. It's alchemy. You put love in and somehow it comes out as sustenance. I didn't understand what she meant then. I was only 12, but I think I do now. Every recipe is a memory. Every meal is a connection. Food is how we say I love you without using words. Warren paged through the book slowly. Each recipe had similar annotations, memories, reflections, little stories that brought Sarah back to life for a moment. Lily had clearly worked on this over time, the handwriting changing slightly from page to page, some entries dated, others not. Near the middle of the book, he found a recipe for roasted chicken with vegetables. The note beside it said a dad's specialty. He doesn't know. It's actually Grandma's recipe with his own modifications. He thinks he invented it. I've never told him. Some secrets are meant to be kept, especially the ones that make people feel capable and proud. Warren smiled through his tears. He had thought he'd invented that recipe, had been quietly proud of it for years. The idea that Lily had known the truth, but let him have his moment of culinary glory, it was such a small thing, such a tender thing. He continued through the book. Pot roast, chocolate chip cookies, spaghetti sauce. Each one had a story, a memory, a moment preserved. This was more than a recipe collection. This was a family history, told through food. On one of the last pages with writing, Lily had added a note dated just 8 months before her death. I want to keep adding to this. I want to make it a complete record of our family's food traditions. Maybe someday I'll have kids and I can pass it down to them. Maybe this book will outlive me, will carry these recipes and these memories forward into a future I can't imagine yet. That's what family is, I think. A chain of moments and meals and small acts of love that connect us across time. Warren closed the book and held it against his chest. She'd wanted children someday. She'd wanted to pass these recipes down. She'd wanted a future that would never come. But she'd created this anyway. She'd preserved these memories anyway, even if she never got to share them with children of her own. She'd made sure they existed, made sure they wouldn't be lost. The afternoon sun was slanting through the windows, warm despite the cold outside. Warren stood and moved to the kitchen counter, looking at the book in his hands. Then, almost without deciding to, he opened it again and found the chicken soup recipe. He had chicken in the cooler outside, vegetables in his supplies. He had time. He had need for something to do with his hands, something to occupy his mind beyond grief and discovery. Warren began to cook. It had been years since he'd made this soup, but the motions came back to him as if no time had passed. Sarah's voice in his memory, patient and warm: brown the chicken first, let the onion soften, don't rush the simmering. Lily's handwriting in front of him, guiding him through the steps she'd so carefully recorded. The cabin filled with the smell of cooking, with steam and warmth and something that felt almost like comfort. Warren stirred the pot and thought about all the times Sarah had made this soup, all the times he'd made it for Lily, all the ways love gets passed down through something as simple as a recipe. When the soup was done, he ladled some into a bowl and sat at the table. The first spoonful was hot, savory, exactly as he remembered. For a moment, just a moment, he could almost feel Sarah standing at the stove, could almost hear Lily's voice from the other room asking when dinner would be ready. Then the moment passed, and he was alone again, but less alone than before. The soup, the recipe book, the memories they carried, they were a kind of company, a kind of presence. Warren ate slowly, savoring each bite, thinking about the women who taught him that food was more than fuel. It was connection. It was history. It was love made tangible. After dinner, he washed the dishes and carefully put the recipe book on the shelf where he could see it from the table. Tomorrow he might try another recipe. The pot roast maybe, or the blueberry pie if he could find the ingredients. Tonight, though, he just sat by the fire and wrote in his notebook about what he'd found, what it meant, how each discovery brought him closer to understanding the daughter he'd lost. The grief was still there. It would always be there, but now it shared space with something else. Gratitude, maybe, or wonder. Or just the simple knowledge that Lily had loved him enough to preserve these pieces of their life together. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. Inside, the fire crackled and popped. Warren pulled a blanket around his shoulders and listened to the cabin settling around him. This place that held so many memories, so many moments, so many small acts of love that connected him across time to the people who'd made him who he was. He wasn't alone. He'd never really been alone. The cabin, the recipes, the letters, the recordings, they were all saying the same thing. You are loved. You were always loved. And that love doesn't end just because life does. Warren closed his eyes and let himself believe it. The days began to blend together in a way that wasn't unpleasant. Warren lost track of whether it was Tuesday or Saturday, whether he'd been at the cabin for 2 weeks or 3. Time felt different here, measured not in hours, but in discoveries, in moments of connection with the daughter who was gone, but somehow still present. He rationed the voice recordings, listening to one every few days, making them last. Each time Lily's voice filled the cabin, he felt something shift inside him. Not healing exactly, but something like it. Understanding maybe, or acceptance, or just the simple relief of feeling close to her again, even if only through recordings made 2 years ago. The recipe book became a regular companion. Warren worked his way through several dishes, following Lily's annotations like a treasure map. Some turned out well, others less so, but the act of cooking itself became a kind of meditation. His hands busy, his mind focused on something other than loss. He was making bread one afternoon, Sarah's recipe, Lily's careful notes about kneading technique, when he heard a vehicle coming up the dirt road. Warren tensed, not ready for company, not wanting the outside world to intrude on this fragile space he'd created. A truck pulled up outside, and a moment later came a knock on the door. Warren opened it to find an elderly woman standing on the porch, her silver hair pulled back in a practical bun, her face weathered but kind. She held a covered dish in her mittened hands. "You must be Warren," she said. "I'm Francine Porter. Live about half a mile down the mountain." "So your smoke figured I'd check in?" Warren hesitated, then stepped back to let her in. The cold followed her inside until he closed the door. "I don't mean to intrude," Francine said, setting the dish on the counter. "Just wanted to make sure you're all right up here. Winter can be hard on folks not used to it." "I'm managing," Warren said, his voice rough from disuse. He couldn't remember the last time he'd spoken aloud to another person. Francine looked around the cabin with the easy familiarity of someone who'd been here before. "This place holds good memories for you, I expect." "Some," Warren said. Then because something about her felt safe, "My daughter loved it here." "Lily!" Francine said, and Warren's head snapped up. "She came to visit me a couple years back. Lovely girl, thoughtful. We had tea, talked about art and life and the quiet virtues of mountain living." Warren felt his chest tighten. "You knew her?" "Only briefly. She was here alone that weekend. Needed some space to think," she said. "I could tell she was working through something, but she had good humor about it. That kind of determined optimism that comes from choosing hope even when it's hard. That sounded exactly like Lily." Warren gestured to the table, suddenly wanting this woman to stay, to tell him more about his daughter. "Would you like coffee?" "I'd love some." They sat across from each other, steam rising from their mugs. The bread dough rested on the counter, waiting to rise. Outside, clouds were gathering for another snowfall. "I was sorry to hear about her passing," Francine said quietly. "Saw the obituary in the county paper a few weeks back. That's a terrible grief to carry." Warren nodded, not trusting his voice. "Is that why you're here? Looking for her in this place?" "Something like that." Warren wrapped his hands around his mug. "I've been finding things she left behind. Letters, recordings, a recipe book. Each one shows me parts of her I never knew about." Francine's eyes were gentle. "Children keep pieces of themselves private. It's not about love or trust. It's about becoming who they are, separate from who we raised them to be. I know that intellectually, but I keep wondering if I failed her somehow. If I was so focused on being strong after my wife died that I forgot to let Lily be weak." "You were doing your best," Francine said. "That's all any parent can do. My best wasn't enough. It never is. That's the hardest lesson of parenthood. You can give everything and it still won't be enough to protect them from the world, from pain, from their own struggles. But that doesn't mean it wasn't worthwhile. That doesn't mean it didn't matter." Warren felt tears building but pushed them down. "She was having anxiety attacks. Seeing a therapist?" "I had no idea. And if you had known, what would you have done differently?" "I would have—" Warren stopped. What would he have done? Tried to fix it, probably. Taken it on as his responsibility. Added it to his list of problems to solve. "I don't know. Maybe she was protecting you. Maybe she needed to handle it herself. Maybe both things are true." Francine sipped her coffee. "When Lily visited me, she talked about this cabin like it was a sanctuary. Said it was the one place she could hear herself think. Could remember what mattered beyond deadlines and expectations and other people's needs. She came here to figure out who she was. Seems like you're doing the same thing." "Now," Warren looked at Francine, this stranger who somehow understood. "I don't know who I am without her. I've been her father for 22 years. That was my identity, my purpose. Now I'm just—" He couldn't finish. "A man who lost his daughter," Francine said softly. "A man who's trying to understand her better even now. A man who's still a father, even though his child is gone. Grief doesn't erase identity, Warren. It transforms it. You're becoming someone new. That's not betrayal. That's survival." They sat in silence for a while, the cabin warm around them, the bread dough slowly rising. "The dish I brought is beef stew," Francine said eventually. "Nothing fancy, but it'll keep you fed for a few days. I'll check on you again next week if that's all right." "It's all right," Warren said. "Thank you." After Francine left, Warren returned to his bread. He shaped the dough, put it in a pan, let it rise again. While he waited, he wandered through the cabin, looking at everything with fresh eyes. Lily had sat in this chair, maybe, had stood at this window, had walked these floors, and touched these walls, and breathed this air. She'd left pieces of herself deliberately, carefully, like a trail for him to follow. Why? Had she known something would happen? Or was it just her way of preserving moments, of creating a record of who she was at 20, uncertain and anxious, but trying her best to figure it out? Warren moved to her old bedroom and stood in the doorway. The half-finished painting still leaned against the wall where he'd found it days ago. He'd been afraid to look at it too closely, afraid of what he might feel. Now he walked over and picked it up, studying it in the fading afternoon light. It showed the view from the cabin window, pine trees, mountains in the distance, a slice of sky. The detail was remarkable. Each needle on each branch suggested with careful brushstrokes the play of light and shadow captured in layers of watercolor. But it was unfinished. The lower right corner was just pencil sketch, waiting for paint that would never come. Warren turned it over. On the back, in Lily's handwriting, "For Dad, when I finish it." She'd meant to complete it, meant to give it to him. Another gift that would never be delivered, another intention interrupted by death. But maybe the incompleteness was the point. Maybe life was always unfinished, always mid-sentence, always in the process of becoming. You never got to see the whole picture. You just had to appreciate what you had while you had it. Warren carried the painting back to the main room and propped it on the mantel above the fireplace, where he could see it from anywhere in the cabin. Unfinished or not, it was beautiful. Unfinished or not, it was Lily's. Unfinished or not, it was enough. The smell of baking bread filled the cabin. Warren checked it, found it golden and perfect, pulled it from the oven. He sliced a piece while it was still warm, buttered it, and ate it standing at the counter. Sarah's recipe, Lily's annotations, his hands making it real. 3 generations connected through flour and yeast, and the simple act of making something nourishing. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft and steady. Inside, Warren stood in the warm cabin and felt for the first time in weeks something almost like peace. Not happiness. He wasn't ready for that, might never be ready for that again. But peace. The ability to exist in this moment without the crushing weight of tomorrow pressing down on him. It was enough. For now, it was enough. 6 weeks had passed since Warren arrived at the cabin, though he only knew this because he'd started marking days in his notebook. The winter had deepened around him, snow piling higher against the walls, temperatures dropping to the point where the stove needed constant feeding. But inside, Warren had created a rhythm, a life of sorts. Wake, tend the fire, make coffee, search, cook, reflect, sleep, repeat. He'd found more small things in those weeks. A bookmark with Lily's handwriting noting favorite quotes. A dried flower pressed between pages of an old nature guide. A shopping list on the refrigerator from 2 years ago. Her careful script listing eggs, bread, batteries. Each discovery was a small gift, a reminder that she'd been here, had existed in this space, had left traces of her passage. But Warren sensed there was more. The letter from the cabinet, the one where Lily had mentioned hiding pieces of herself around the cabin that suggested intentionality, planning. She'd left the obvious things, yes, but Warren suspected there were also hidden things, things he'd have to work to find. He started looking more carefully at the cabin's architecture, at places that might conceal small spaces. He checked behind pictures on the walls, underneath furniture, inside the backs of drawers. He felt along the undersides of shelves, checked the chimney for hidden niches. It was while moving the bed to clean beneath it that Warren heard something shift. Not just the usual creak of old furniture, but a different sound, hollow, loose. Warren got down on his hands and knees, running his fingers along the floorboards beneath where the bed had stood. Most were solid, nailed tight, but two boards in the corner had a slight give to them. His heart began to race. Warren went to the kitchen, found a butter knife, and used it to carefully pry up the loose boards. They came away easily as if they'd been loosened before. Beneath them was a small space, perhaps 6 inches deep, created by the gap between floor and foundation. Inside that space sat a mason jar, the kind used for canning. It was sealed tight, and inside Warren could see folded papers, something small and metallic, and what looked like a photograph. He lifted the jar out carefully, hands trembling. This was it. This was the kind of hiding place that required deliberate effort, that suggested something important enough to conceal. Warren carried the jar to the main room and sat at the table in the afternoon light. For a long moment he just looked at it, this sealed container that held more pieces of his daughter's hidden life. He was almost afraid to open it, afraid of what he might learn, what else he might have missed while she was alive. But he'd come this far. He'd already learned so much about Lily's inner world, about the struggles she'd kept private, the thoughts she'd only shared with paper and digital recorders. Whatever was in this jar, he owed it to her to see it, to know it, to witness the fullness of who she'd been. Warren unscrewed the lid. Inside were several items, each carefully placed. First, the photograph. Warren lifted it out and felt his breath catch. Lily stood beside a young man, both of them smiling. They were by a lake, summer sunshine, casual clothes. The young man had dark hair, an easy grin, his arm around Lily's shoulders. And Lily, she looked happy. Not just smiling for the camera happy, but genuinely deeply content. Her eyes bright, her whole face lit with something Warren recognized as joy. He'd never seen this photo before. Had never met this young man, had never known about this relationship that clearly mattered enough to photograph, to preserve, to hide in a mason jar beneath the floorboards. Warren turned the photo over. On the back, in Lily's writing, "Alec and me, July 2021, before everything got complicated, Alec," the name from the voice recordings. The boyfriend she'd broken up with because she wasn't ready, because she needed to figure out who she was first. Warren set the photo down and reached for the folded papers. There were several of them, notes written on different types of paper. He unfolded the first one. "Dear Alec," it began, "I know I'm not actually going to send this. I'm not brave enough for that. But I need to write it anyway, need to get these thoughts out of my head. You asked me why I needed to end things, and I couldn't explain it. How do you tell someone that you care about them, but you're not whole enough yet to share yourself? How do you say I need to be alone, not because of you, but because of me?" Warren read through the note, his daughter's words painting a picture of a relationship that was tender and real, but ultimately untenable. She cared for this Alec, maybe even loved him, but she'd been self-aware enough to know she wasn't ready, that she needed to work on herself first. The other notes were similar, unsent messages working through her feelings, trying to articulate what she could barely understand herself. Some were sad, some were hopeful. All of them showed a young woman trying her best to be honest about her limitations, her needs, her journey toward becoming whole. The last note was different, shorter. It was dated 3 months after the others. "Dear Alec, I hope you're doing well. I hope you found someone who can give you what I couldn't. You deserved better than my confusion, my inability to commit. But I want you to know that knowing you mattered. You showed me what it felt like to be cared for, really cared for, by someone who wasn't obligated to love me. That was a gift. Thank you for that. I hope someday I'll be ready for what you were offering. But right now, I need to figure out who I am before I can be with anyone. I need to start again." Warren folded the notes carefully and set them aside. Start again. That phrase kept appearing in Lily's writings, her recordings, her thoughts. She'd been in a constant process of reinvention, of trying to become someone she could be proud of, Someone whole and certain and capable. She'd never gotten the chance to finish that process. The final item in the jar was a small brass key, tarnished with age. Warren held it up to the light, turning it over. It was old-fashioned, the kind that might fit an antique lock or a small box. Nothing in the cabin that he'd seen so far required this kind of key, which meant there was something else, something still hidden. Warren sat back, looking at the three items spread before him. The photograph of Lily, with someone she'd loved but couldn't be with. The notes working through feelings she'd never shared. The key to something he hadn't found yet. He thought about what Francine had said during her visit. Children keep pieces of themselves private. It's about becoming who they are, separate from who we raise them to be. Lily had been becoming someone, had been in the messy, complicated process of figuring out her own identity, her own needs, her own path forward. She'd had a relationship Warren never knew about. She'd struggled with anxiety he never witnessed. She'd come to this cabin alone, to work through things she couldn't work through anywhere else, and Warren had missed all of it. Not because he didn't care, but because she'd kept it from him. Because she'd been protecting him, or protecting herself, or maybe just creating necessary space to grow. He couldn't decide if that made him feel better or worse. Warren picked up the photograph again, studying Alec's face, trying to see what Lily had seen in him. He looked kind. That was something. Young and uncertain like everyone at that age, but kind. "I hope you're doing all right," Warren said aloud to the photo, "wherever you are. I hope you remember her fondly. I hope it didn't hurt too much when she ended things." The cabin was quiet, except for the crackling fire and the wind outside. Warren gathered the items and placed them carefully on the mantel beside Lily's unfinished painting. Evidence of her life, her loves, her struggles, her becoming. But the key that he kept. He turned it over in his fingers, feeling its weight, wondering what it might unlock. The letter from the cabinet had mentioned fixing something broken, finding what she'd left. The voice recordings had talked about leaving pieces of herself here. Everything suggested intentionality, planning, a treasure hunt she'd created, perhaps unconsciously, perhaps very deliberately, for someone to follow after she was gone. Warren stood and began searching again, this time looking specifically for something that might require this key. A box, a drawer, a hidden compartment. He checked the obvious places first. Desk drawers, storage chests, old trunks in the corner, nothing. He expanded his search, checking less obvious spots. Behind books on the shelf, inside the stove's ashpan, under loose stones in the foundation. Still nothing. By the time darkness fell, Warren had searched every accessible part of the cabin except one place he'd been avoiding. The attic crawl space, accessible only by a pull-down ladder in the ceiling of the small back hallway. He'd glanced up there briefly when he first arrived, seen only shadows and dust, and decided it could wait. Maybe it had waited long enough. Warren pulled the cord that released the ladder. It unfolded with a groan of protesting hinges, sending down a shower of dust. He fetched a flashlight, tested its beam, and began to climb. The attic was low-ceilinged, cramped, filled with the accumulated debris of decades. Old furniture, boxes of forgotten belongings, the general detritus that families stash away, meaning to deal with later, but never do. Warren moved carefully, flashlight sweeping across the space. Cobwebs caught the light, creating momentary constellations. Something small skittered away into darkness. A mouse, probably, and then in the far corner, his flashlight caught something different. A shape too regular, too intentional. Warren crawled toward it, careful not to put his weight on any boards that looked suspect. It was a small wooden box, perhaps the size of a shoebox, carved with intricate designs. It looked old, handmade, beautiful. And it had a lock on the front, a small brass lock that might fit the key in Warren's pocket. He'd found it. Warren carried the wooden box down from the attic like it was made of glass, like sudden movement might make it disappear. His heart hammered in his chest. His hands shook slightly as he descended the ladder. This was it. Whatever Lily had been building toward, whatever she'd hidden most carefully, was inside this box. He set it on the table and just looked at it for a long moment. The box itself was remarkable. carved with intricate patterns of leaves and vines, the wood dark with age and care. It looked like something that had been in the family for generations, though Warren had never seen it before. Then again, there was a lot about his family, about his daughter, that he'd never seen before. Warren pulled the brass key from his pocket. His hand trembled as he inserted it into the lock. It fit perfectly, turned with a soft click that seemed loud in the quiet cabin. The lock released. Warren lifted the lid. Inside, wrapped in soft cloth, was a USB drive. It was labeled in Lily's handwriting, "For Dad, watch when you're ready." Beneath the USB drive was a smaller envelope, also labeled, "Read first." Warren picked up the envelope with shaking hands. He opened it carefully, unfolding the single sheet of paper inside. The letter was dated 8 months before Lily's death, the same time frame as some of the other items he'd found. "Dear Dad," it began, "if you're reading this, something has happened to me. I don't know what, and I'm not predicting anything. I'm only 20 years old. I have my whole life ahead of me. But losing Mom when I was 12 taught me something important. Life is fragile. We don't always get to say the things we mean to say. We don't always get the chance to explain ourselves, to be understood, to leave behind what matters most. So I'm doing something that might seem strange or even morbid. I'm creating a kind of insurance policy, not for money but for understanding. I'm leaving pieces of myself around this cabin, pieces that show who I really am, what I really think, what I really feel. The letters, the recordings, the recipe book, the photograph, this box. All of it is intentional. All of it is for you. Because here's what I know about you, Dad. If something happens to me, you'll come here. You'll need the quiet, the space, the distance from a world that keeps moving when yours has stopped. And when you come here grieving and lost, you'll start looking. You'll search for me in the places I used to be. And you'll find these things I've left behind. I want you to know me, Dad, really know me. Not just the version of me I showed you, the daughter who was doing fine, who had it all together, who didn't want to burden you with her struggles. I want you to know the real me, the anxious one, the uncertain one, the one who loved and lost and didn't always know what she was doing. I want you to know that I understood why you had to be strong after Mom died. I understood that you were protecting me, showing me how to keep going, even when the world falls apart. You were such a good father, Dad, the best. You gave me everything. But I also want you to know that your strength sometimes made it hard for me to show weakness. Not your fault, mine. I decided you'd been through enough, that you didn't need my problems added to your own. So I learned to carry things alone. I learned to work through anxiety and heartbreak and uncertainty without asking for help. I'm telling you this now. Through this letter you'll only read if I'm gone, because I want you to understand you didn't fail me. You gave me exactly what I needed to survive, to grow, to become myself. If I kept things from you, it was only because I loved you enough to want to protect you the way you protected me. Inside this box is a USB drive. On it are video messages I recorded during my solo visit to the cabin 2 years ago. I was 20. Working through some stuff, trying to figure out who I was and who I wanted to be. I decided to record messages to you, just in case. Just in case life turned out to be as fragile as I'd learned it could be. Watch them when you're ready, not before. They're intense, emotional, completely honest. They're me at my most vulnerable, talking to you about things I never had the courage to say in person. And here's the most important part, Dad. Don't let my death, if it comes early, destroy you. You already survived losing Mom. I know that took everything you had. I know it reshaped you into someone different. But you kept going. You raised me. You loved me. You showed me what strength looks like. Now I need you to do it again. I need you to grieve, feel everything, don't hold back. But then I need you to choose life. Choose to keep going. Choose to find meaning and purpose and maybe even joy again. Promise me that, Dad. Promise me you'll fix that broken cabinet you've been avoiding for 8 years. When you fix it, you'll find this letter and you'll know it's time to start over. I love you more than you'll ever know. Thank you for being exactly the father I needed. Thank you for every sacrifice, every moment of patience, every expression of love. You made my life beautiful. Whatever happens, whatever time I get, it's enough because you were in it. Start again, Dad, for me, for yourself, for Mum, for all the love that's still in you, waiting for somewhere to go. All my love, always and forever, Lily. Warren couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't process what he'd just read. She'd known. Not that she would die, not the specifics, but she'd understood the possibility, had understood it deeply enough to plan for it, to create this elaborate trail of breadcrumbs for him to follow. Every discovery he'd made, the letters, the recordings, the recipe book, the photograph, the key, this box, none of it was accidental. Lily had placed each item deliberately, carefully, creating a path through his grief. A way for him to know her, understand her, and ultimately find his way back to living. The broken cabinet. She'd mentioned it specifically. He'd been avoiding fixing it for years, and she'd known he would, had known it would eventually bother him enough that he'd tackle it. And when he did, he'd find the hidden compartment, the tin box, the letter that explained everything. She'd orchestrated his healing from beyond death. Warren read the letter again, then a third time, tears streaming down his face. He'd spent weeks feeling like he'd failed her, like he'd missed so much of her inner life. And here she was, telling him explicitly that he hadn't failed, that he'd given her exactly what she needed. But more than that, she was asking him to live. Not just survive, but really live. Choose life, she'd written. Start again. Warren looked at the USB drive still in the box. Video messages recorded 2 years ago, Lily speaking directly to him about things she'd never said in person. His hand reached for it, then hesitated. Watch them when you're ready, she'd written. Was he ready? Could anyone ever be ready for something like this? The cabin was dark now, except for the fire's glow and a single lamp. Outside, wind rattled the windows. Inside, Warren sat with his daughter's final gift, this carefully constructed treasure hunt that had led him from grief toward understanding, from numbness toward feeling. She'd known him so well, known he'd come here, known he'd search, known he'd need to find pieces of her in order to find pieces of himself again. The question now was whether he was strong enough to watch whatever was on that USB drive, whether he could handle seeing her face, hearing her voice, receiving whatever final messages she'd left for him. Warren stood and made tea, his hands moving automatically through the familiar motions. He fed the stove, adjusted the damper, ensured the cabin would stay warm through the night. All the while his mind raced. Lily had created this for him, had spent time and thought and energy planning for a future where she might not exist, also that he wouldn't be lost in grief. That was love. That was the purest form of love. Thinking of someone else's pain and trying to ease it before it even happened. Warren returned to the table and picked up the USB drive. He had his laptop in his bag, hadn't used it in weeks. He pulled it out, opened it, waited for it to boot up. His cursor hovered over the USB drive icon. Inside were files. He could see 4 video files, dated across one weekend 2 years ago. This was the culmination. Everything else had been preparation, building toward this moment. His daughter, speaking to him from the past, knowing he would be watching from a future where she no longer existed. Warren took a deep breath and clicked on the first file. The screen went black for a moment, then brightened to show the interior of the cabin. This very cabin, this very room. The camera, her phone probably, was propped on something, angled to show the table and the chair where someone sat. Lily. Warren's breath caught. There she was, alive and moving, 20 years old. Wearing a flannel shirt, he remembered, her hair pulled back in a casual ponytail. She looked nervous, kept glancing at the camera like she wasn't sure about doing this. Then she took a breath and began to speak. "Hi, Dad. If you're watching this, well, I guess something happened to me." Her voice. God, her actual voice, not from memory or dreams, but real, recorded, preserved. Warren felt tears already streaming down his face. "I don't want to be morbid," Lily continued, offering a sad smile. "I'm not predicting anything. I'm healthy, I'm careful, I have every intention of living to be 90 and giving you grandchildren and driving you crazy with my life choices for decades to come. But losing Mom taught me that we don't always get guarantees. We don't always get to say goodbye, so I'm saying some things now while I can, just in case." She paused, looked down at her hands, then back at the camera. "This is the first of 4 videos. I'm going to try to, I don't know, explain myself, tell you things I've never said, give you whatever closure I can, if closure is even possible when someone dies unexpectedly. That's what I'm trying to do here. Bear with me. I've never done anything like this before." Warren wanted to pause it, to prepare himself, but he couldn't. He needed to hear whatever she had to say, needed to absorb every word, every expression, every moment of her presence. "I want to start by talking about my childhood," Lily said. "About what it was like growing up with you as my dad, especially after we lost Mom, because I hope that knowing you did a good job will matter to you. If you're grieving me the way you grieved her, I imagine you're tearing yourself apart, wondering if you could have done more, been better, somehow prevented whatever happened. So I want to be really clear. You were an amazing father. The best I could have asked for." She leaned forward slightly, her face earnest. "Do you remember teaching me to ride a bike? I was 6, maybe 7. Mum was sick, but not hospital sick yet, just tired all the time sick. You took me to that empty parking lot behind the elementary school and ran alongside me for hours, holding the seat, refusing to let go even though I kept telling you I was ready. And then finally you did let go, and I rode maybe 20 feet before falling. I scraped my knee pretty bad, remember? And you scooped me up and told me that falling was part of learning, that courage wasn't about never being afraid, but about trying again, even when you were." Warren remembered. God, he remembered every detail of that day. "That's who you were to me, Dad, every single day. Someone who held on when I needed support and let go when I needed freedom. Someone who taught me that it's okay to fall as long as you get back up. You were both parents after Mom died. You went to every school event, every art show, every parent-teacher conference. You learned to braid hair from YouTube videos. You figured out how to talk to me about periods and boys and all the stuff that probably terrified you. You never made me feel like I was too much or that you resented having to do it alone." Lily's eyes glistened with tears. "And when things were hard, and they were hard, Dad, I know they were, you never let me see you break. You cried in private, kept your grief contained so I wouldn't have to carry it. I know you thought you were protecting me, and you were. You were teaching me that life goes on even after the worst thing happens. You were showing me how to survive." She wiped her eyes, laughed a little at herself. "Sorry, I'm already crying, and I'm only 3 minutes in. This is going to be a mess." Warren smiled through his own tears. That was so Lily, apologizing for her emotions, even in a video she recorded in private. The video continued. Lily talked about specific memories, moments that had stuck with her. The time Warren stayed up all night, helping her finish a science project she'd procrastinated on. The way he always made her favorite breakfast on the first day of school. How he learned to speak her love language, art supplies and quiet understanding, rather than excessive questions or forced conversations. "You gave me space to grieve Mom in my own way," Lily said. "You never made me talk before I was ready. You were there, present, solid, a constant in a world that suddenly felt completely uncertain. That's what I needed, Dad, exactly that. Nothing more, nothing less." The first video ended with Lily promising more in the next one, reminding him to take breaks if he needed them, telling him she loved him. Warren sat in silence for a moment, then checked the time. The video had been 15 minutes long, but felt like both seconds and hours. His face was wet, his chest ached, his hands trembled on the keyboard. He could stop here, watch the rest tomorrow or the next day, pace himself. But he couldn't. He needed more, needed to hear her voice, see her face, feel connected to her in this immediate, visceral way. Warren clicked on the second video. Lily appeared again. Same setting, same flannel shirt, but her hair down now. She looked more composed, like she'd found her rhythm. "Okay, video 2, she said. This one is going to be harder. This is where I talk about the things I never told you. The struggles I kept private, not because I didn't trust you, but because I thought I was protecting you. You'd already been through so much. I didn't want to add to your burden." She took a breath. "I've been having anxiety attacks. Started about 6 months ago, maybe a year. They're not constant, not debilitating, but they're there. My chest gets tight, my thoughts spiral. I feel like I can't breathe. It's scary, Dad, really scary. And I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to worry. I didn't want you to think you'd failed somehow, that losing Mom had damaged me too badly. Because that's not what this is. This isn't about you failing. This is just life. Brain chemistry. The cumulative effect of loss and stress and being a young adult trying to figure everything out. Warren felt his heart breaking all over again. She'd been suffering and he'd had no idea. I started seeing a therapist, Lily continued. Her name is Dr. Chen. She's wonderful. She's helping me develop coping strategies, work through the anxiety, understand where it comes from. It's getting better, slowly. I'm learning to manage it. But I wanted you to know, if you're watching this, that I was struggling with something. That I wasn't always as okay as I seemed. She looked directly at the camera, at him. And I need you to know that it's okay that you didn't notice. I was hiding it deliberately. You're not a mind reader, Dad. You're just a man who did his absolute best in an impossible situation. That's all anyone can ask. The video went on. Lily talked about the pressure she felt to have her life figured out, about watching her peers seem so certain while she felt lost. She talked about choosing her major, about professors who inspired her, about slowly finding her way. I'm getting there, she said near the end. I don't have it all figured out, but I'm getting there. And a lot of that is because of you. Because you showed me that it's okay to not have answers, that strength isn't about never struggling, but about keeping going despite the struggle. You taught me that, Dad. You taught me resilience without even trying. The second video ended. Warren immediately reached for the third, but stopped himself. He needed a moment, needed to breathe, to process, to simply exist with what he'd just witnessed. Warren stood and walked to the window. Outside, snow was falling again, heavy and silent. Inside, the fire crackled. Somewhere between those two sounds, the quiet of snow and the voice of flame, Warren found himself. He'd been a good father. Lily had said so, explicitly, looking directly into the camera with love and gratitude in her eyes. He hadn't failed her. He'd given her what she needed, even if it wasn't everything, even if she'd still struggled with things he never saw. That had to be enough. It had to be. Warren made tea, his hands moving through the familiar motions while his mind remained fixed on the laptop screen. He could see the thumbnail of the third video waiting, Lily's face frozen mid-expression. He carried his mug back to the table and sat down, pulling the blanket around his shoulders against the cold that had nothing to do with temperature. He clicked play. This time Lily was sitting on the couch, the one Warren had slept on these past weeks. The angle was different, more intimate somehow. She looked tired but peaceful, like she'd been walking in the woods and had just come inside. Video 3, she said. I've been putting this one off because it's about something I haven't fully processed myself yet. Relationships, love, all that messy, complicated stuff that everyone seems to figure out except me. She smiled ruefully. There was a guy. His name is Alec. You never met him. I never brought him home, never mentioned him during our phone calls. Not because I was ashamed or because he wasn't important, but because, I don't know. I think I wanted to keep that part of my life separate, private, mine. Warren thought of the photograph in the mason jar, the young man with the easy smile and his arm around Lily's shoulders. We met in a design class my sophomore year, Lily continued. He was funny and kind and patient with my anxiety in ways I didn't know to ask for. We dated for about 4 months. It was good, Dad, really good. He made me feel seen and valued, and like maybe I wasn't as much of a mess as I thought I was. She paused, picking at a thread on the couch cushion. But I ended it. Not because of anything he did wrong, not because I stopped caring. I ended it because I realized I wasn't ready. I was still figuring out who I was, still working through my own stuff, and I couldn't be the person he needed while I was still becoming the person I needed to be. Does that make sense? Lily looked up at the camera. I think about Mom sometimes and wonder if she ever felt like this. Like she was supposed to have everything figured out, but secretly had no idea what she was doing. I wish I could ask her. I wish I could ask her about heartbreak and anxiety and how you know when you're ready to let someone in. But I can't, so I do my best. I make decisions that feel right even when they hurt. I try to be honest with myself and with other people. That's all I know how to do. She pulled her knees up to her chest, wrapping her arms around them. I hope Alec is doing okay. I hope I didn't hurt him too badly. I hope he understands that it wasn't about him. It was about me needing to be whole before I could share myself with someone. That's what therapy taught me. You can't pour from an empty cup. I needed to fill mine first. Warren felt a surge of pride mixed with sadness. His daughter had been so wise, so self-aware at just 20 years old. She'd made hard choices, honored her own needs, been brave enough to walk away from something good because it wasn't the right time. Which brings me to this cabin, Lily said, and her expression softened. This place has always felt special to me. When I was a kid, it was about adventure, exploring the woods, catching frogs, building fairy houses out of sticks and moss. But as I got older, it became something else, a sanctuary, a place where I could hear my own thoughts instead of everyone else's expectations. She looked around the room, her gaze sweeping across the space. I can feel Mom here. I know that sounds strange, but it's true. Like she's somehow still present in the wood and the light and the way the wind sounds through the pines. This place was hers too before it was mine. She loved it here. And sitting in this cabin, in this room, on this couch, it makes me feel connected to her in a way I don't feel anywhere else. Lily turned back to the camera. That's why I've been leaving pieces of myself here. The letters, the recordings, the recipe book. I want this cabin to hold me the way it holds Mom. I want it to be a place where the people I love can come and feel connected to all of us. Past, present, future. A place that remembers. She smiled, but there were tears in her eyes. I know I'm only 20. I know I probably have decades ahead of me, that I'm being dramatic and maybe even a little morbid. But losing Mom taught me that time isn't guaranteed. We think we have forever, and then suddenly we don't. So I'm doing this now while I can. I'm leaving these pieces so that if something happens, if my time ends up being shorter than expected, at least you'll know me. Really know me. Not just the daughter who smiled and said she was fine, but the real me. The messy, uncertain, still becoming me. She wiped her eyes. One more video to go, Dad. The last one is the important one. The one where I say what really needs to be said. But take a break if you need to. Make some tea. Take a walk. Breathe. This is a lot, I know. It's a lot for me, and I'm the one recording it. Just take care of yourself. That's what I want most. For you to take care of yourself, especially after I'm gone. If I'm gone. This is so weird to talk about. She laughed, shook her head. Okay, I love you. I'll see you in the next video. Well, you'll see me. You know what I mean. The screen went dark. Warren sat in the silence that followed, his tea gone cold, the fire burning low. 3 videos down, 1 to go. 3 pieces of Lily's heart offered up to him across time, across the barrier between life and death. She'd been so young in these recordings. Just 20, still figuring things out, still becoming. And now she'd never get to finish that becoming. Never get to be 25, 30, 40. Never get to fall in love again when she was ready. Never get to have the children she'd imagined. Never get to grow old and wise and certain. But she'd left him this. These videos, these pieces, this elaborate expression of love that had guided him through the darkest weeks of his life. Warren looked at the laptop screen, at the thumbnail of the 4th video. The final one. The important one, as Lily had said. He fed the stove, made more tea, wrapped himself in the blanket again. Outside, the snow had stopped. Inside, everything was quiet, except for his breathing and the occasional pop of burning wood. Warren clicked on the final video. The 4th video opened differently. Lily was outside, standing in front of the cabin with the forest behind her. Morning light filtered through the pines, golden and soft. She looked more composed than in the other videos, more resolved. Like she'd worked through something difficult and come out the other side. Okay, Dad, this is the last one. The important one. She took a deep breath, her expression serious but calm. I've spent the last 3 days here at the cabin thinking about life, about death, about what matters. And I keep coming back to the same thing. When Mom died, I learned that everything can change in a single moment. One day you're healthy, the next you're sick. One day you're alive, the next you're not. It's terrifying if you let yourself think about it too much. She stepped closer to the camera. But here's what else I learned. That same fragility that makes life scary also makes it precious. Every moment matters because we don't know how many moments we get. Every conversation could be the last one. Every hug, every laugh, every ordinary Tuesday morning, they all matter because they might be all we have. Lily's eyes were bright with emotion, but her voice stayed steady. Mom's death taught me to live intentionally, to pay attention, to tell people I love them, to not waste time on things that don't matter, and most importantly, to appreciate what I have while I have it. I think that's why I'm making these videos, because I appreciate you, Dad. I appreciate every sacrifice you made, every moment of love you gave me, every time you showed up even when you were exhausted or heartbroken or barely holding it together yourself. She wiped a tear from her cheek. If you're watching this, I'm gone. And if I'm gone, I need you to hear what I'm about to say. Really hear it, Dad. Are you listening? Warren nodded at the screen, throat too tight to speak. You cannot let this break you. Her voice was firm now, almost commanding. I know how much losing Mom hurt you. I saw it, even though you tried to hide it. I know it took everything you had to keep going, to keep being my father, to keep living, when part of you wanted to stop. But you did it. You survived. You kept going. You showed me what real strength looks like. Lily stepped even closer to the camera, her face filling the screen. Now you have to do it again. And I know that's not fair. I know you shouldn't have to lose another person you love. I know it's asking too much. But Dad, you have to keep going. Not for me, I'm gone, I don't need anything anymore. For yourself, for the life you still have ahead of you. For all the love that's still inside you waiting for somewhere to go. She paused, letting her words settle. I need you to grieve. Really grieve. Don't hold it in. Don't try to be strong for anyone. Feel everything. Cry, rage, fall apart if you need to. Let yourself break. That's okay. That's necessary. But then, Dad, then you have to choose life. Her eyes were fierce now, determined. You have to wake up one morning and decide that you're going to keep living. Not just existing, not just going through the motions, but actually living. Find something that matters to you. Help someone who needs help. Create something beautiful. Fall in love again if you can. Mom would want that, and so do I. Take all that love you gave to me and me give it to the world. That's how you honor me. That's how you honor Mom. Not by suffering forever, but by living fully. Lily's expression softened. I had a beautiful life, Dad. 22 years of feeling loved every single day. Of knowing I was safe, valued, cherished. Of having a father who would do anything for me. That's more than a lot of people get in a full lifetime. I'm grateful for every moment. Every single one. She smiled through her tears. You didn't fail me. You gave me everything I needed to be whoever I was meant to be. If my time was shorter than we hoped, that's not your fault. That's just life. Random and unfair and heartbreaking, but also beautiful. Also full of love and meaning and moments worth having. Lily took a step back, composing herself. So here's what I need you to do. Grieve me, yes. Miss me, absolutely. But then start again. Fix things that are broken, starting with that cabinet you've been avoiding for years. When you fix it, you'll find what I left for you. You'll understand that I planned this, that I wanted you to have a path through your grief. A way back to living. She wiped her eyes one final time. I love you, Dad, more than I ever found the right words to say. Thank you for being exactly who I needed. Thank you for showing me how to be strong, and how to be kind, and how to keep going even when everything hurts. You made my life worth living. Now I need you to make yours worth living too. Lily smiled, full and genuine despite the tears. Go live, Dad, for both of us. Make it count. Make it beautiful. And know that wherever I am, whatever comes next, I'm grateful. For you, for this life, for every moment we had together. She raised her hand in a wave. Goodbye, Dad. I love you. Now go fix that cabinet and start over. The screen went black. Warren sat in the darkness, Lily's final words echoing in his mind. The cabin was silent, except for his breathing and the crackling fire. Outside, stars emerged through breaking clouds. He'd fixed the cabinet. He'd found what she left. And now he understood. His daughter had given him permission to live. More than permission, a command. A final act of love from beyond death, asking him to choose life, even in the face of unbearable loss. Warren closed the laptop and sat in the warm cabin, feeling something shift deep inside him. Not healing, that would take time, but something like it. Purpose, direction, the first small spark of wanting to continue. Morning came slowly, soft light creeping across the cabin floor. Warren woke on the couch, the laptop still on the table beside him. The fire burned down to glowing embers. He'd fallen asleep sometime after watching the videos, exhausted from crying, from feeling, from finally allowing himself to break open completely. But now, waking in the grey dawn, he felt different, lighter somehow, despite the grief that still sat heavy in his chest. The weight hadn't disappeared, it would never disappear, but it had shifted, become something he could carry, rather than something that crushed him. Warren made coffee in Sarah's old percolator, the ritual, familiar and grounding. He stood at the window with his mug, looking out at the view Lily had tried to capture in her unfinished painting. The pines stood dark against the snow, mountains rising in the distance, the sky slowly brightening from grey to pale blue. She'd stood here too, had looked at this same view, had thought thoughts he'd never know, had dreamed dreams that would never come true. But she'd also left pieces of herself behind, had deliberately created a map through grief, had loved him enough to plan for his healing even before she needed healing herself. That was the gift. Not just the artifacts, not just the videos, but the evidence of her intentionality. The proof that she'd understood him, had known what he would need, had cared enough to provide it. Warren set down his mug and walked through the cabin, touching things as he went. The mantel where Lily's painting rested beside the photograph of her with Alec. The shelf where her recipe book sat among the other cookbooks. The table where he'd read her letters, listened to her recordings, watched her videos. Each surface held a piece of her, a moment preserved. He'd spent nearly 2 months here, searching and discovering and slowly understanding. The cabin had done what Lily promised it would. Given him space to grieve, to remember, to begin the long process of becoming someone new. Someone who had lost his daughter, but was still, somehow, her father. Someone who carried grief, but also carried love. Warren pulled out his phone and dialed Francine's number. She answered on the 3rd ring. "Warren, everything all right?" "I need your help with something," he said. "The cabin needs work, real work. I want to restore it, make it what it should be, what Lily would have wanted it to be." Francine was quiet for a moment. "That's a big project. I know, but I need to do it. Need to create something, fix something, make something better. Will you help me plan it?" "Of course," Francine said warmly. "Come down for lunch tomorrow. We'll talk about what needs doing." After they hung up, Warren began making lists in his notebook. Repairs needed, improvements wanted, materials required. The cabin needed new windows, better insulation, a proper foundation for the porch. The stove worked but could be upgraded. The bathroom needed updating. It would take months, maybe years, but he had time now. He had purpose. He'd return to his job eventually, but not yet. Not until he'd done this work, both the physical labor and the internal kind. Not until he'd honored Lily's request to start again. Warren spent the afternoon organizing the artifacts Lily had left. He carefully packed the letters, making copies first. The voice recorder he placed in a small wooden box, along with the USB drive. Precious things, to be protected and preserved. The recipe book he wrapped in cloth. The photograph he framed using an old frame he found in a closet. These items would come home with him eventually, but for now they belonged here. This was their place. The cabin that held memories of 3 generations. His parents who'd built it, Sarah who'd loved it, Lily who'd found herself here, and now Warren, learning to live again within its walls. As evening approached, Warren took a walk through the woods, following the paths Lily must have walked. The snow crunched under his boots, his breath visible in the cold air. He stopped in a clearing where the last light filtered through the pines, golden and fading. "I heard you," he said aloud. "I heard everything you said. And I'm going to try, Lily. I'm going to really try. A bird called from somewhere in the trees. The wind moved through the branches, creating a sound like whispered conversation. Warren stood there until the light was nearly gone, then turned back toward the cabin. That night, he cooked from the recipe book. Sarah's pot roast, the one Lily had noted, was actually his specialty, with modifications he'd forgotten came from his wife. He cooked slowly, carefully, letting the familiar motions ground him. When it was done, he set the table properly, as if for company. He ate alone but didn't feel lonely. The cabin was full of presents, Sarah's recipes, Lily's voice on recordings he could play any time he needed, the evidence of love preserved in every corner. They were gone but not absent, dead but still with him in all the ways that mattered. After dinner, Warren opened his notebook to a fresh page and began to write. "Dear Lily," he started, "I watched your videos. I understand now what you were trying to do, what you left for me to find. You were right. I came here broken and you gave me a path back, not to who I was before, but to who I need to be now. Someone who carries grief, but also carries hope. Someone who remembers you, but also keeps living. Thank you for that gift. Thank you for knowing me well enough to plan for this. Thank you for loving me enough to ask me to keep going." He wrote for an hour, telling her about his plans for the cabin, about the cooking he'd been doing, about how her unfinished painting had become a kind of meditation on life itself, beautiful even incomplete, meaningful even unfinished. "I'll never stop missing you," he wrote, "but I'll also never stop being grateful I got to be your father. 22 years with you was enough because you made every year count. You lived intentionally, loved fully, left behind pieces of yourself that will outlast all of us. That's a life well lived, Lily. That's a legacy worth leaving." Warren signed his name and closed the notebook. Tomorrow he'd start planning the restoration. Next week he'd begin the actual work. Eventually he'd return to the world beyond this cabin, but he'd carry this place with him, this sanctuary where he'd learned to grieve and to hope in equal measure. The fire burned low. Outside, stars emerged, bright and countless. Inside, Warren sat in the warm cabin and felt, for the first time since Lily's death, something almost like peace. Not happiness. Not yet, maybe not ever in the way it used to be. But peace. The ability to exist in this moment without being crushed by the weight of all the moments that would never come. It was enough. For now, it was enough. And tomorrow he would begin again.